radio sort of tape recorders. You carry a tape recorder like this to something like this. You take a razor blade and cut the tape and cut it into. I mean, it was the tail end of that, I should say. It didn't last very long.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me loud and clear? Great. Well, it's been a pretty extraordinary week in British politics, and some might say pretty extraordinary day in British politics. The day's the day we learn that there will be surveillance cameras, not just in our big cities, but literally in every single village. The surveillance state is getting very, very close indeed. And that, of course, in the same week that we learn that the 800-year right to trial by jury is to be abolished in the majority of cases. And by the way, the argument that magistrates deal with many of the minor cases, well, think about it, 3 magistrates actually form a mini-jury of their own. And of course, despite not being in the manifesto, the government want to introduce digital ID, leaving literally every single one of us in this country open to hackers. And it is, frankly, a very authoritarian government. It doesn't really believe in liberty. It doesn't really believe in individual freedom. And we learned, and it began last year, it doesn't really believe in democracy either. The decision last year for 7 of the county council elections not to go ahead on May the 1st bore no logic at all. How was it logical that Kent went ahead, but just across the river, Essex didn't? It made no sense at all. Now, I know one of the reasons for it, of course, was the Conservative leaders of those councils were urging the government not for the elections to go ahead because they wanted to stay in place. Well, we had been promised mayoral elections this year, and I spoke to a senior member of an Essex council this morning who told me word for word, the councils are ready for these elections and we have spent millions across the county of Essex alone in preparation. Now, the fact that we've been told that the county council elections will go ahead just 1 year late is a good thing, not a bad thing. But the fact that these mayoral contests are to be postponed for a further 2 years is monstrous, given firstly that the electorate were told they would go ahead, given the amount of money that's been spent in preparing for them. But there's another factor I think we should consider. My voters in Clacton will now be expected and asked to vote in 2026, in 2027, and in 2028. Forgive me, but they might be getting slightly confused as to what's going on in local government. Well, it is a local government reorganisation. I have to say, it's one personally that I'm completely opposed to. The concept of out on the end of Essex, tendering district council, which at least people do bear some sense of belonging to, identity with, allegiance to, will get replaced by some amorphous mass of a unitary, is not something that I approve of or believe in at all. But I have to accept there's nothing we can do to stop it. But the other reason why these mayoral elections should go ahead is we're going to need an elected figure in local politics to actually explain to people why they're being asked to vote year after year after year. So you really could say to yourself, there is absolutely no reason why these elections should not go ahead. But then there is, of course, one very big reason why these elections should not go ahead, and there's no prizes for guessing, but it is an electoral calculus put out their figures just a couple of hours ago that Reform would have won all 4 of these contests and would have won them quite comfortably. The government are basically committing electoral fraud upon the electorate who had every opportunity to put Reform mayors in place. Those elections would have been under first past the post. Nothing really could have changed that. By the time 2028 comes along, it'll be AV or some other system which the government think will disfavour the prospects of a reform win. You believe it or not believe it, the Guido Fawkes website say they've seen a briefing that the government wishes to make sure that reform can't win more than one mayoral contest every year. So what is happening is wrong. However, our adopted mayoral candidates, Peter Harris, Rear Admiral Parry, David Bick and Paul Lynham, they will stay in place. They will be our candidates in 2028, and they will now lead our county council campaigns in those areas. I don't think the government can now cancel those county council elections. They said only in exceptional circumstances, but I think that probably would mean there has been a sort of declaration, perhaps, of another pandemic. So we are annoyed, we are angry at what happened last year, and it just shows the total and utter disdain this country has for liberty, democracy, freedom in this country and everything that we have held dear. I have to say personally, I increasingly hold the individuals that run this government with absolute and total contempt. So today is not a complete loss for us, and I suspect that this time yesterday we might have seen an attempt to postpone the county council elections for a further year, but perhaps they've realised just what a level of uproar and outrage that might have caused. We did last year launch a petition on this, which gained hundreds of thousands of votes, and we've launched that petition again today. Interestingly, the Conservative Party are now adopting exactly the same slogan as us, using the same font size on their social media, and pretending that they too are champions of democracy when it's their very own council leaders last year and this year urging for the elections not to go ahead. So we will fight the county elections, our mayoral candidates will stay in place, and we will, whatever the system, go ahead and win those council elections next year. Now, I know that there'll be a variety of questions, because reform does seem to be in the news quite a lot lately. So this is a good opportunity to ask pretty much whatever you want. It's open season. I'm on my Jack Jones, so here we go. Let's start with Damien Grammaticus from the BBC.
Can I just ask, you said open season about anything. Can I ask just about something different?
Yes, of course you can. My dear fellow, I would expect nothing less from our favourite national broadcaster.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. This morning, Richard Tice said on the radio, he was asked about the comments made by schoolmates of yours who have said that comments you made they viewed as racist and offensive. He said that they were lying. You have said before that you did make comments. It may have been banter, it wasn't directly racially abusing anyone. So Richard Tice is wrong, isn't he?
I thought this morning's performance by one of your lower grade presenters on the Today programme was utterly disgraceful. I think to frame a question around the leader of Reform's relationship with Hitler, which is how she framed it, was despicable, disgusting, beyond belief. Are you surprised that 500,000 people every year refuse to pay the licence fee? But let me say this to you. The double standards and hypocrisy of the BBC are absolutely astonishing. At the time I was alleged to have made these remarks, one of your most popular weekly shows was the Black and White Minstrels, right? The BBC were very happy to use blackface. Oh, and not just in the Black and White Minstrels, you did it in It Ain't Half Hot Mum as well. And what about Alf Garnett? Do you remember what he called Marigold? Do you remember the word he used to describe Marigold on not live, but on primetime national TV? I better not repeat the word, otherwise you'll all use it and say that I used it. Homophobia? It ain't half hot, Mum? Are you being served? Oh, and what about Bernard Manning? Perfectly happy at exactly the same time for Bernard Manning to appear on primetime national BBC comedy, telling jokes for which these days you'd probably get a knock at the door from our thought police and perhaps get a 31 month prison sentence. I cannot put up with the double standards of the BBC about what I'm alleged to have said 49 years ago and what you were putting out on mainstream content. So I want an apology from the BBC for virtually everything you did throughout the 1970s and 80s. And I will respond to your direct question. I've received many letters over the course of the last few days from people that I was at school with. This one I think is particularly relevant. I was a Jewish pupil at Dulwich College at the same time, and I remember him very well. While there was plenty of macho, tongue-in-cheek schoolboy banter, it was humour. And yes, sometimes it was offensive, rather like most of the BBC's output, but never with malice. I never heard him racially abuse anyone. If he had, he would have been reported and punished. He wasn't. The news stories are without evidence except for belatedly politically dubious recollections from nearly half a century ago. Back in the 1970s, the culture was very different. Perhaps, Damon, you should reflect on that. Especially at Dulwich. Lots of boys said things they'd regret today, or just laugh at. Whilst Nigel stood out, he was neither aggressive nor a racist. If I can help in any way, let me know. And I've had plenty of those messages over the course of the last few days, and I'm sick to death of the double standards and hypocrisy, above all, of your organisation. And what happened on the Today programme this morning was a complete bloody disgrace. Next, Sam Coates from Sky News. No, I'm done with you, thank you.
My question was, he said they were lying, and it sounds like...
Sam Coates from Sky... I'm really, until you apologise for all of your output, your appalling output, at the same time that I'm accused of saying these things which I deny, I'm not speaking to you. All right? Sam Coates, Sky News.
Nigel Farage.
Yes.
£9 million is a whopping donation, and if it was given to another party, you'd expect quite a lot of transparency around it. So,
Sorry.
Can you tell us how often do you speak to Christopher Harburn? What do you talk about? What do you think he wants from a reformed UK government? And if he loves Britain so much, why does he spend so long in Thailand?
Because that's where he's been based for some of his business activities for many, many years. As you know, Sam, because you're better researched than the BBC on some things, he has a global business. He's got business interests in all the continents of the world. His natural home is here. His donation is nothing out of the blue. It's nothing new. I mean, after all, he gave a significant amount of money. He was a dedicated Brexiteer. He gave a significant amount of money to the Brexit Party at the time, starting off with the European elections in 2019. And, you know, I think what he wants to do, really, is to try and help us get onto a level playing field with the trade union-funded Labour Party and a Conservative Party where there seems to be a remarkable correlation, I can't think why, between donations and membership of the House of Lords. So I think that what Mr. Harbour is trying to do is get us onto a level playing field. Yes, it is a very big donation, but I mean, bear in mind, you know, that the Labour Party, literally on the eve of the election in 24, took £4 million from a tax haven-based hedge fund with shares in oil and the arms industry. So perhaps it's not quite as unusual as you think. And does he want, hang on, does he want anything from me? No. Absolutely nothing in return at all. He just happens to think that we've not made the most of Brexit, that we're not getting into the 21st century technologies, and for all the talk about data centres, for all the talk about AI, for all the talk, well, at least from us at least, not the others, about crypto, you know, we cannot do this without the most massive re-evaluation of what is currently a catastrophic energy policy. Does he want anything in return for his money? I promise you, absolutely nothing. Do I speak to him regularly? Maybe once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, but certainly not more than that. And have I promised him anything? Hand on heart, I have not promised him a single thing in return for his donation. Thank you. Can we go on to Catherine Foster at GB News?
Thank you. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Microphones everywhere.
Try that again. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Yeah.
You've accused the government of committing electoral fraud, but they say that they're just trying to devolve powers back to local communities.
Oh, yes.
Don't they have a point? And also, the inquiry onto the Dawn Sturgis murder has found that Putin is morally responsible. Is that your view too? Because at the time that the Skripals were still in hospital, didn't you say that the then government had jumped the gun in blaming Russia? Thank you.
I didn't know what had happened. There was a poisoning. Do I think Putin's a monster? I think he proves that with every single week that goes by. I think, my friend Donald Trump genuinely thought he could somehow get the Ukrainians, the Russian leaders together and forge some kind of sensible compromise to end the sort of scale of killing we've not seen on a battlefield since probably World War I, or maybe Stalingrad, going on in Europe. And Putin proves with every week that goes by that he's not rational, that he doesn't want a just settlement, and that frankly he is an incredibly dangerous man. So of that there is absolutely no doubt. And by the way, this makes me laugh with this mob that we pay money to every year, and others. I'm pro-Putin, because I once said in 2013 I admired him as a leader but disliked him as a human being and wouldn't live in the Soviet Union. Shortly after, and I'm a Russian asset apparently according to Starmer for doing that. A year after that, the Queen met him. Whether she was a Russian asset, I'm not entirely sure. So that's that. In terms of devolution, well, the definition of devolution, of course, is passing power from central government down so that decision-making is nearer the people. Tendring District Council, which has 2 parliamentary constituencies in it, is geographically right out on the eastern front of Essex. It's quite tough to get to by road and by rail, but it does have an identifiable district council, one that arguably, indeed Peter Harris was leader of it a couple of years ago, one that arguably has been better led than many councils in the country, that is not saddled with a great degree of debt, and they will be giving all their powers away and up to a higher amorphous unitary, probably based in Colchester, but we don't know, Peter, where it's going to be based or what it's going to be, and the county of Essex will be divided up into 3, 4 or 5 separate unitaries. So I just don't buy this. And very interestingly, Bob Russell, who was the Lib Dem Member of Parliament for Colchester for many years, he and I have been at one on this, and it's nice to agree with them occasionally on something. And he says, well, back in 1973 was the last major government reorganisation, but nobody cancelled elections of any kind. They actually held elections to see what the electorate thought of what the proposed changes were. And that argument now seems to be out of the window. So I just don't buy devolution in every sense, because district councils are handing powers up to unitaries. And I think the upshot of this will be that the smaller rural communities around our country will find themselves increasingly governed by decisions made by cities or major towns and big population centres. And I think, given, frankly, the assault that this government has launched on our rural communities, this will go down very, very badly indeed. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Thank you very much. I've spoken to a lot of people from Dulwich
Good for
College.
you. Let's move on to the Times,
Stefan
shall we?
Baranok. He says he can remember you
Very good.
making hissing noises
Very
towards
good.
Peter Attention.
Harry, you are wasting your time. Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning. Do you want to hear some of the Bernard Manning jokes on ITV?
These are pretty serious allegations.
I'm sure they are.
Remember you
I'm sure they are.
making noises
Very good.
towards Jewish people
Very good.
and joking about how Hitler should have gassed him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Do you,
I'm sure.
like your deputy leader,
I'm sure.
think these allegations are also made of?
Shall I reread this letter to you? Shall I reread this letter to you? There was plenty of macho, tongue-in-cheek schoolboy banter when I was there with Farage. I was a Jewish pupil. It was humour, sometimes offensive, but never with malice. And I'm just frankly, Harry, as I say, you were the channel of Bernard Manning. He occasionally appeared on the Beeb. You Your channel, at the same time that I'm accused of saying this, which I deny in any malicious or nasty way, at the same time as that, you every single week had homophobic content, you had racist content, you had all sorts of content which these days you'd be locked up for. So let's cut the double standards from British broadcasters, shall we? I've made it as clear as I'm going to. Max Kendricks on the Times.
Thank you. There's a plan by Labour to change election rules to stop donations by crypto. Do you think that's specifically an attack on you and your party, especially considering the donor who is a big crypto investor? And I wonder, you read out one letter there and you said you had others.
Yeah.
How many of your former pupils have written to you?
I've had half a dozen letters from people I was at school with. There may be more in the email system somewhere. I don't know. I've had other letters from school which I'm just not going to make public because you'll chase after them and make their lives a misery. So I shan't do that. Look, we are the only political party that even understands the 21st century revolution that cryptocurrencies are. We've already published our white paper for what we do to make London a centre for crypto trading. I have been to meet the Governor of the Bank of England, whose attitude towards stablecoins frankly belongs, well, not even to the 20th century, but way back to the 19th century. There are currently 7 million holders of digital assets in this country. That is, in fact, I think that may actually have gone up since the 7 million. It'll be 10 million within the year. 1 in 4 under 30s have confidence in digital assets, and yet the Conservative and Labour parties literally don't understand what we're even talking about. And we are being left behind. Being left behind on AI, being left behind on data centres, being left behind on crypto, massively behind on robotics. I mean, to a level you can't even believe. And we are the only party that actually gets this, understands this, wants to embrace this. But we're being resisted by the Bank of England, we're being resisted by the FCA, we're being resisted by the Labour Party, resisted by the Conservative Party. But I think we're on the side of what is a major, major attitudinal change to money, and dare I say it, sovereignty at an individual level. And as one that was famously debanked and have now recently been de-accounted and de-insured and de-pension platformed, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. So we're the first political party to say, yes, of course, you can donate to us in crypto. And I think the statement that the Labour Party have made on this is aimed directly at us. And goodness knows what other horrors the elections bill will have when it's published at some point. This government has no respect for liberty, freedom or democracy whatsoever. And they're doing everything they can to save their own skins. But we absolutely believe that cryptocurrencies are a vital part of our economic future, both for Britain and for the free world, and for individuals who want to have control over their own money, where government or banks acting under political influence can't damage their lives. And I say that personally with a very, very high degree of passion. Jack Elsom from The Sun, who broke this story last night.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. Just from your answer to the BBC, you said until you apologise, I'm not speaking to you. Is this an official reform boycott of the BBC until they apologise?
I'm too busy to speak to them.
But are you boycotting them until they apologise now?
I'm too busy to speak to them.
Okay.
Their double standards are absolutely contemptuous. I've had enough.
And then
You might think, yeah, I mean, you might say I actually mean that.
you ruled out a pact with the Conservatives, and instead said that anything would be some sort of engineering of a reverse takeover. But at what point, when you accept so many former Conservatives into your rank, do you become exposed to the claims that it's not them being taken over, but it's you?
Well, no, because actually we have free will, don't we? You know, I don't have to welcome the Dean Dorries into the party. I don't have to welcome in anybody into the party, certainly not into a role. So we will take people into the party who we think can add to us. And one of the points that I made at our conference back in September is, we've all got strengths and weaknesses. Our biggest weakness is a lack of experience. Richard Tice, myself, Zia, Leila Cunningham, all of our frontline people, none of them have ever actually been at the coalface of government. So we want, and that's why Danny Kruger was really important to us, because Danny had worked inside leaders' offices and number 10 for prime ministers and as an MP for basically 20 years. Danny knows more about how it works in number 10, what the interactions are with the civil service. So, and the same goes at, the same goes at county level. If you get a complete set of virginal councillors walking into County Hall, you've probably got a bit of a problem. You need people with experience of politics, experience of life, experience of management, who've been there before. So look, we will not become the Conservative Party 2.0. And as far as pacts are concerned, well, I made the point, that I sort of half jokingly say we might do a reverse takeover, but I think that after May next year, when you're all sitting here in a room like this, you'll have a very different view of the question you just asked. Because I think next May marks the moment when the Conservative Party, after a good run of 200 years, ceases to be a national party. They are going to be obliterated in Scotland. They are going to barely exist in Wales. And if you look at where the local councils are taking place, the counties that will now go ahead are all Conservative held. I believe we're going to do phenomenally well in those counties, as we did in the 10 that we won a clear majority in, the other 2 that we're the main party in. And you look at where thousands of council seats are being fought. Gateshead, Newcastle, Barnsley, Sandwell, Wolverhampton. I genuinely think that when we sit here on May the 8th next year, you'll all take a very different view. They will not be a national party. So the view I take, we'll see whether I'm right. That's what we're working towards. Daniel Martin from The Telegraph.
Hello, Daniel Martin from The Telegraph. You've criticised Labour's plans on trial by jury.
Yes.
Would you commit to reversing them if you get into government?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
then also,
it's an absolutely fundamental freedom. It is our last protection against the state. I think it's absolutely... and by the way, of course, there are flaws with the jury system. There are flaws with whatever system you come up with. But, the idea of this is to cut court time. I was in court recently. Nice chap, crossed the channel, wanted to kill me, normal sort of drill. And I was amazed how much hanging around there was. We were due to start at a certain time. Why didn't we start? Serco might deliver the defendant late, is one of the reasons I was given. Apparently this happens almost every day. And frankly, if they wanted to clear the backlog of minor cases, then I tell you what they ought to do. They ought to reopen all those magistrates' courts that have closed up and down this country. They ought to appeal to the retired lay magistrate to say, come back, help us deal with this. It's about 80,000 cases now, I think, that we're roughly backed up. They should appeal to that. And frankly, there's no reason why our Crown Courts, for the slightly more serious cases, there is no reason why they can't work from 7 in the morning till 10 at night to clear this backlog and to abolish a right to devalue something called Magna Carta, which, do you know what? We're actually admired in many parts of the world for being the author of this very idea of individual liberty and freedom from a potentially overwhelming state is, I think, a very poor and frankly sick excuse. Let's go to Jonathan Walker from the Daily Express.
From what you've said, that you don't support the changes to local councils. Does that include the creation of mayors? Do you think that these mayors should not exist? And would a reform government abolish them? And would you bring back first past the post for elections?
We do not have the power to stop this local government reorganisation. We don't have the power to stop the mayors being put in place in these counties. I accept that. I regret it, and I've made my point passionately, I think, about a small, quite rural district council that I happen to be one of the representatives for. But I have to be realistic. And realism says it's happening. It isn't going to change. The different architecture with police and crime commissioners and the incredible responsibility these 4 guys would have had. Incredible responsibility. So look, we're not standing here saying we're going to reverse these devolved changes. Frankly, I think our electorates are being put through enough to get to the destination. As I said earlier, elections in Clacton, 26, 27 and 28, I think our folks, frankly, will be dizzy. So we're not going to reverse it, but we will do our absolute best to try to make it work as well as it possibly can. David Lynch, Press Association.
Hi, Mr. Farage. Yeah, David Lynch from P8. Just wanted to ask again about your 9 million donation. What due diligence is the party actually doing to make sure what is the source of that cash is all hunky-dory, basically?
Very interesting you asked that, because actually the system we put in place for cryptocurrencies would have been the most lengthy, most complex and deepest form of compliance vetting of any donors ever in British politics. And all of that have been put in place. And if you want, Max, I can send you a paper on the rules that we put in place to make sure we know the source of donations. Look, we've been through all... By the way, it's funny, one of the criticisms of us has been that we've sent back more donations than any other party. Yes, do you know why? Because we're that strict. And we know that we're going to be held to a higher standard than any other party. A little example, people sending us money from what was a holding company. You know, the Liberal Democrats years ago got away with a couple of million donation on this. When we got quite a big donation from a holding company, we sent it straight back and said we didn't believe that was within the spirit and the letter of the legislation. So I would argue that in terms of financial compliance, I genuinely think we are the hottest and the strictest of any party, and that applies to sterling donations or donations in crypto that get exchanged into sterling in. We are very, very comfortable and confident that in the case of Mr. Harborne, we know where his incomes come from. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to Tim Ross from Politico.
So, in light of the comments from Emma Barnett this morning on the Today programme, talking about your, quotes, relationship with Hitler.
Yeah, lovely, wasn't it? Charming. It's what I pay my licence fee for, after all.
If that's not true, will you and your lawyers be considering legal action against the BBC on defamation grounds on that? And then very quickly for our international readers, I just wondered, obviously you said Putin doesn't want a just settlement in Ukraine. Will you be advising your friend, the President of the United States, to do everything he can to help Ukraine win on the battlefield now and change course?
Okay, that's a big question. In terms of legal action, there's one legal action I wasn't necessarily going to say this, but you teased it out of me. You say and say. The one legal action that we're going to consider tonight, but I've not yet had proper time to look at it, is whether we can go to judicial review to make these mayoral elections go ahead. That is something I'll be looking at tonight, and I can't really give you a firm opinion on it now, only to say that we have talked to our lawyers briefly before we came in this room, and we're considering that. When it comes to generally fighting libel actions, defamation actions, I have fought them in the past. I've never lost one. I haven't fought very many, but my experience is they take up a huge amount of your emotional capital, your financial capital. You almost become obsessed with the case, and you live, breathe, and sleep it to the detriment of virtually everything else. What is clear is that, I think I said it already to one of the earlier questions, I think that Putin is not looking for any sense of a fair and equitable deal, and I made it clear at the weekend that you know, you could argue that the limits of size put on the Ukrainian army are bigger than they ever would have been in peacetime. Yeah, you could argue that, but equally it's making a demand on Ukrainian sovereignty, And generally, the only people that accept limitations on the size of their army, their air force, or their navy are people who've signed unconditional surrenders. So on a point of sovereignty principle, I don't find that acceptable. And, look, of course there are arguments about Russian-speaking areas. There are arguments about what might have happened over the course of the last 20 years, 100 years. All of that's complicated. But I don't think that Zelensky, and who knows how long he's going to last, because we've always known that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, but he's shown personal bravery. How can Zelensky give up territory that they've lost tens of thousands of lives defending? So the deal as it is at the moment doesn't work and can't stand. But look, can I be clear? That is not an anti-Trump comment. I admire Donald Trump for trying damned hard to find a peace settlement. And what he's achieved in the Middle East, I think, is greater than any American president has achieved in half a century. And Trump's strength is that he is by nature a peacemaker, not a warmonger, like most of the American presidents that have preceded him in the previous quarter of a century. Some would argue his desperation for peace is perhaps a weakness as well. You can view it how you want, but he's always been very, very determined to use this second presidency to try and use American might and muscle, and forget the tariff arguments, they're about money, but to try and achieve peace in the world if he can. And I admire him hugely for it, and I know how frustrated he's been by Putin's lack of rationality. Aggie Chambers from LBC. Chambers.
Shamberg from LBC. Can I just check what you meant in your responses to Damien Grammaticus and Harry Horton? Because it seemed like you were suggesting that the alleged comments should be placed in the context of time. Do you agree now that comments like that would be unacceptable now? Are you trying to suggest they weren't acceptable then? And there's lots of Tories that obviously you wouldn't want in Reform UK, but would you be interested in having Robert Jenrick by your side?
That's a really good question. Well done. Look, back in the 1970s, the culture was very different, especially at Dulwich. Lots of boys said lots of things they'd regret today or simply just laugh at. And the double standards from the BBC this morning were wholly unacceptable. Now, the Jenrick question cropped up in an article in the Times that popped up, to my surprise, last night, which basically said that people within Reform were advising me that I should reach out to Robert Jenrick. And I get people in Reform urging and advising me every day to reach out to sporting figures, to reach out to business figures, to reach out to media figures, to reach out to political figures. And have one or two suggested I should reach out to Jenrick? Yes, they have, because they believe that his conversion from being the Remainer Robert Jenrick to being what he is today is a genuine one. And I don't know. But if it is a genuine one, I'd be more than happy to talk to him. Okay. Right, we've got a couple more to go through. Lucy Dunn from The Spectator.
Hi, Nigel. You talked earlier about the need for nominated figures in devolved areas helping people turn out and vote. So, in that case, why won't you choose and announce leaders of the Welsh and Scottish Reform parties ahead of the Holyrood and Senate election? Are you worried about being overshadowed, perhaps? And just as
please.
If I may,
please.
Reform has received, obviously, a very big donation. What are you going to spend the money on?
You clearly think I'm some sort of narcissistic loon, who won't allow anybody else in the party to have any profile at all. If you actually watch broadcast media, you'll see I rarely appear now. I'm more than happy, for Richard Tice, for Zia, Lila Cunningham, for others, David Bull, for others, to go out and appear on, TV debate programmes, phone-in radio. Sarah does quite a bit of it too. Danny a bit less so because he's behind the scenes working on, our big plan going ahead. I want as much talent in the party as possible, and I absolutely can't wait for somebody who's better looking, younger, more intelligent and more articulate than me. And when that person comes along, I will recognise it and I will know it and I'll be delighted because I can get back down the pub or do whatever else I want to do. But for the moment, I'm going to spearhead this, I'm going to lead this, and I've got 30 years of experience, and nobody else in Britain knows how to start and build a political party from scratch. If Jeremy Corbyn and Zahra Sultana had come to me, things might have been very different for their organisation. I'm in Scotland on Saturday, and I think there'll be a story or two that your magazine will want to cover. Midday, Saturday, Falkirk, McDonald Hotel. See you there. Archie Earle from Unheard with 3 more.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. Former Reform MP Rupert Lowe recently appeared on American journalist Tucker Carlson's podcast.
Good for him.
Did you reject the chance to go on the podcast before he went on?
I've known Tucker for a very, very long time. I used to appear quite regularly on his Fox News show. He even once said I was his favourite foreigner. But relations between us have cooled a little in recent times. Thank you. Rowena Mason from The Guardian. Oh, play the joke or double it. Go on.
Making things up. Are you saying that they have a different interpretation of events that actually...
Recollections may vary after half a century. Thank you. Let's go on to the last one. Sophie Hutchinson from the Daily Mirror.
Sophie Hutchinson from the Mirror. So, you read the letter from your school friend.
I did.
Thank you for that, which says that you did say offensive things at school.
I say them every day.
Whether they were with malice or not, deliberately every day.
I've said offensive things today. There we are.
Will you apologise to the people for the offence you caused?
If I genuinely thought I'd hurt somebody, I would apologise, of course. I've never, ever, ever in my nature been a bully of any kind at all, and I would never wish to. And I look forward to a proper apology for homophobia, sexism and racism coming from our national broadcaster. Yes?
Mr. Farage, can I ask you...
Yep, hand over. Yep. You weren't on the list.
I am on the list.
What are you on now?
What should happen, Mr. Farage, to Councillor Ian Cooper, Staffordshire County Council reform leader, who it said has posted messages racist, hurtful, abusive, profiling people like David Lammy and Sadiq Khan? What should happen to him?
I discovered this at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. I was slightly shocked that there appeared to be a social media account which had not been declared to us, and part of vetting is people have to be honest with us and declare what social media accounts they've had. And, with candidates, whether they're candidates or elected, you can deal with problems in their past, whatever they might be, personal, you name it, but you have to know what they are. So I made a snap decision at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon that we had to go through due process. All I would say is it doesn't look very good.
Should he be suspended?
We're going through due process. All I can say is it doesn't look very good. We expect our people to be truthful with us, and if they're truthful with us, we'll be honourable towards them. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.